Hello, everyone, and welcome to Petite to Queen's Claim Your Career Crown podcast. I'm your host, and today I'm joined by our wonderful guest, Mpume Ncube-Daka. And today we're going to be talking about how your ABCs create effective communication in the workplace. Let's talk a little bit about Mpume. She's earned her stripes in the corporate world. She has worked for multinational and stock exchange listed organizations like Unilever, Nestle, MTN, and Ericsson. Mpume co-founded a marketing consultancy business called Onyx Marketing Communications. She then joined MultiChoice with executive positions in strategy, business, product, and innovation. During Mpume's tenure at MultiChoice, her involvement with projects that contributed to women's empowerment and leadership had a profound impact on her. It helped Mpume to clarify her passion for change. The only thing Mpume loves more than change is change conversations. As a qualified corporate level coach, Mpume has gained deep understanding of what is required to identify each individual's unique talents and passion to ultimately benefit organizations while facilitating personal growth. Personal growth is, well, it's personal, right? And Mpume often works with specialists and other professionals in line with her clients' needs. Along with her extensive degrees and credentials, Mpume is an associate certified coach with International Coaching Federation and an Enneagram accredited practitioner. My goodness, say that fast 6 times. You are so, the resume is long. Then she's also, on top of all of that, she's a mom of 3, a wife, and an entrepreneur. All these different aspects of herself grant Mpume unique insights that brings her into her role as a facilitator and moderator, lecturer, and speaker. Oh my goodness, what a resume, Mpume. I am so thrilled to have you here. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for having me. I think we need to shorten that resume. It seems too long now.
Well, it was absolutely brilliant. And thank you for being so gracious as I butchered your name. So for those of you who are joining us for the very first time, and you want to make sure you don't miss a single episode of Claim Your Career Crown, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what we're doing and you love our show, despite my mix-ups and mess-ups, then please take that moment to give us a 5-star review. We would very much appreciate it. And while we're on the topic, I just have to say perfectionism is overrated. So let's get started, Mpume. And I would love to hear from you. What inspired you to get started on your current path?
Wow, a lot, Lynn. I think I knew that with my last corporate gig, it was going to be the last one. I really wanted to change careers, which I had done a number of times. And I think I found a passion in working with people, impacting people, and really making a change. And that for me is really what drove me. But with COVID, I also experienced some, I had a cousin of mine that passed on. My husband ended up in the hospital with a big operation, and then I lost a friend to COVID. That really inspired me to say, if I were to die today, would I really think that I've done my bit in the world? And the answer was no. And that's when I really decided that I wanted to, I contributed to the great resignation, that's what I say. And that's when I left the corporate space to really explore my passions and see what I could do and bet on myself.
That is wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing that really personal story. And I'm so sorry for your loss, and wonderful to see how the resilience that you've tapped into to be here today and how much you've accomplished since then. And I would love to hear about especially the side of communication and how you really tap into helping people who you coach and whom you work with to be better communicators, and how you do this, if you have a specific process?
So, Lean, I think how this has come about in my space is that there was a point in my career where I felt stuck.
Yeah.
And I got told that I was not vocal enough, I was not visible enough. And that for me really pushed me to a point to say, what does that mean? What does vocal enough mean? How do I need to communicate? And I was being pushed to a point to say, whatever that I'm passionate about, and for the things that I want, I really need to speak up. And I wasn't speaking enough. And the other element was also around the clients that I was starting to get, that were saying either they are too aggressive and they're not getting the promotions that they are expecting, and they were feeling stuck. And for me, though, the process then starts looking at identifying what is the main cause that you're battling to communicate, and where does that come from. And ideally, with regards to communication, you want it to be concise so that there's no confusion. You want it to be factual. You want it to be clear. And you also want to have a very clear view of how you want that message to land with the person that you're speaking to. So you also need to take into account the context. You need to take into account the culture, the environment, the tone that you're bringing in the conversation, whether it's written or it's verbal, as well as your body language, because body language says a lot.
That's true. Absolutely. There is a lot of nonverbal communication, and how your stances, especially for women, sitting up straight, rolling your shoulders back, and, having your chin level with the floor, especially and also when you're standing, that really puts you in a position of standing in your own power. And it's very important. And it is a method of communicating that I know what I'm saying. I'm really good at what I do, and it gives you that confidence and assurance. Thank you so much. So I'm curious, in your experience, through the corporate world and now where you're at, were there things that you sort of alluded to that held you back, that you needed to address and overcome so you could move forward the way you have?
The way, I think sometimes there's fear of saying you're not going to be heard. And that really then plays a lot into your own head. And these are the stories that we tell ourselves. And so there's that fear. There's also, there could be issues around self-confidence and self-esteem. That as well really comes through, because now if your self-esteem or your self-confidence is low, then you do not have the courage to actually speak out and speak your mind in certain situations. And sometimes we get held back by not having a fear of not being taken seriously, and telling ourselves that we are not good enough, and not believing that whatever that we're saying is going to be taken as seriously, mainly depending on the environment that you're in. So you find that maybe if you're a female and you are in an environment that is dominated by men, that then also plays a factor. Am I being heard? I'm not being taken seriously. And then your self-confidence gets knocked over. As well as some of the things that could have happened when you were growing up. You might have been that child that was told, you talk too much, you need to shut up sometimes. And that starts playing its own way, even in the corporate space. And sometimes you need to remind yourself to say, I'm not a child anymore. I need to speak up when I really want to.
Yeah, there are so many things that come from our background and from that childhood that impact us and influence our behavior as adults. And it's important to tap into that. I so fully agree. And I really appreciate your alluding to that. So I'm curious, when you're working with individuals and you start looking at the communication and what they're doing and how they're communicating, and not only just with you, but maybe in the environment, where they want to make some change, where they see that opportunity for them to grow. do you find something that is consistently holding people back or something that they need to work on?
I've found that self-confidence is the one that holds a lot of people back. And that shows up a lot within the communicating space. So if you, as I was saying, if your self-confidence is very low, then you do not have the courage to speak out, and you also doubt what you're saying. So you question whether what you're saying is being taken seriously. You question whether people are hearing you. You question whether you've got authority to even talk about the things that you want to talk about. And it even sometimes get to a point of whether you question the work that you're doing just because your self-confidence is low. So there's a lot of elements of really working on the self-confidence part. And sometimes I actually find that there could be some therapy work that the person might need to do, but I'm not a therapist, so they will need to engage with the therapist on the side to actually work on that. But you find that sometimes you need to get to a bottom of ways their self-confidence being chipped away and what has happened, and then start building from that perspective.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned, in your bio that how when you are working with people and you see that side that they need an additional resource, that you bring that in so that they can really fully realize their potential and move forward to grow, and how they can then be more effective, but in their work and in their life, and really get the things that they aspire to. I'm curious, when you're working with confidence, is there any kind of specific tips that you would give our audience on how some things that they could do, exercises or some mindset pieces of advice that you have so that they could, move forward and break free from that position of lacking confidence?
I think it's the main thing that I usually focus on is for somebody to think back where they felt that their self-confidence was at the highest. What was happening at that point in time? And really finding a way to go back to that, and also realizing what was the feeling that they had and what were the things that they were doing at that point in time. Because if you can tap into that energy, and if you can think back and realize that something has happened to chip away on your confidence, it's not a matter that you've never felt that you had high self-confidence and you could stand up and speak out and really hold your space. But finding a way to tap back into that, I usually find that people start to realize, to say, I can go back to those spaces. And that really then starts bringing back that part. But we really need to work on what has happened now that has pushed you off kilter in some way. But knowing that time when you were at the high, then tapping back into that energy.
Yeah. No, I think that exercise of time travel, both going back in time and also moving forward and manifesting, that vision of where you are going to be, is really an effective technique to use. So thank you so much for sharing that. I am curious, for our listeners who tuned in on the ABCs of communication, what are some key takeaways or tips that you would like to share to them today that will help them be more effective and really step into that, as you said, their own space?
So I think for me, it's assessing the importance of not having that conversation and asking yourself, what are you going to lose if you don't communicate? Because if you can answer that question, you push yourself into a space to say, if I decide then not to communicate, I should be okay with making that decision. But what is it that you are going to lose if you do not communicate? That kind of switches your mindset and go, but I could have a lot to lose, in fact. So let me speak up. So for me, that assessment at that point in time to say, if I don't speak up now, what am I losing?
Yeah.
And when you answer that question, then finding the courage, no matter how difficult that conversation can be, finding the courage to actually have it, I think that becomes the biggest thing that anybody can do for themselves.
I love that. That is a fabulous nugget. And I hope everyone really tapped into that. And so step into, what would I lose if I don't speak up? Wow, that is fantastic. I want to just say, Mpume, thank you so much. And also for being so gracious throughout this entire podcast. And thank you for sharing how your ABCs create effective communication in the workplace. And I know that our listeners would love to hear more about you and where they can connect with you and find out more about you.
So they can connect with me on my website, which is www.changeconversations.co.za.
All right. We'll be sure to provide that link along with Mpume's links for Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn, and all of that. And she also has a podcast all down below. So that's all going to be one click away. And I want to thank Mpume and everyone who tuned in to this very informative discussion. And if you have any ideas that you would like to share, please leave us a comment down below. We love to hear your thoughts. And if you have a question or would like to suggest a topic for discussion, please email us at jointheconversation@petitetoqueen.com. And to stay current on all of our insightful advice, our breakthrough advantages, wonderful episodes like the one today, please sign up for our weekly wisdoms newsletter at petitetoqueen.com, and you won't miss a thing. I want to thank everyone who tuned in and for listening. And Mpume, thank you so much for being such a gracious, wonderful guest. And I am just really excited to have had you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for having me. It was really great chatting to you.